The night was loud with laughter as a black beggar sang softly on the corner of a golden-lit street. His cracked voice echoed against the walls, but instead of respect, it brought cruel smiles. A group of wealthy guests leaving the gala paused, led by a tall millionaire in a designer suit. He smirked, pulled out a shiny coin, and tossed it at the man's feet. "Here's payment for your noise," he sneered, earning roars of laughter from his friends. The beggar bent down slowly, picked up the coin, and whispered, "Music is not noise, sir. It's memory." The millionaire chuckled, ready to walk away, until suddenly his smile froze. His breath caught in his chest. That voice, that melody, it was the same lullaby he used to sing to his only son, the son he had buried years ago. The mocking laughter faded into silence. For the first time in years, the arrogant man felt his heart tremble. Narrator. He mocked him as worthless, but what he was about to hear would shatter his world forever. The millionaire's name was Richard Wallace, a man whose very presence commanded attention. At only 45, he had turned his family's modest business into an empire worth billions. People didn't see him as a man, but as a symbol of power, influence, and ruthless ambition. His black luxury car, his tailored suits, his armed bodyguards. Everything about him screamed control. Yet behind a polished smile and expensive champagne glasses, there was a coldness, a wall built so high that no human warmth could break through. Richard believed money could silence pain, by loyalty, erase weakness. To him, compassion was nothing more than a distraction for the poor. But there was one secret Richard never spoke about. Years ago, he had a son, a boy who loved music more than anything. Late at night, Richard would hum a lullaby at his bedside, pretending it was just another routine, never realizing those quiet moments would be the last memories he would cling to. A tragic car accident ripped the boy from his life when he was only 12. The sound of sirens, the hospital's cold corridors, the stillness of the lifeless body, it all replayed in Richard's mind like a nightmare he could never escape. Instead of grieving, he buried his sorrow under layers of arrogance and wealth. He never spoke of his son again. To the world, Richard was unshakable, but deep inside, a wound festered. And then there was Samuel, the beggar Richard mocked so easily. To most passers-by, Samuel was just another shadow on the city's busy streets. His clothes were torn, his shoes barely held together, his hands rough from years of struggle. Every evening, he would sit near the Grand Theater, singing songs that no one cared to hear. Children laughed, teenagers jeered, businessmen walked faster, as if his voice were a stain on their perfect night. But Samuel never stopped. For him, singing wasn't about applause or coins. It was survival. It was a thread keeping his broken life from unraveling completely. Long before poverty swallowed him, Samuel had a family, a wife who believed in his dreams, a son who used to sit on his lap while he strummed an old guitar. But fate had been cruel. Illness took his wife, debts took his home, and hardship separated him from the boy he had once promised the world. All he had left was music. It was his way of remembering the love he lost, the hope he once carried. Every note he sang was a prayer, every melody a whisper to the heavens that maybe, just maybe, someone would listen. Two men, standing on opposite ends of life, one wrapped in riches but haunted by silence, the other drowning in poverty yet clinging to the only sound that mattered, music. Neither knew their destinies were about to collide in a way that would expose truths long buried and change both their lives forever. Richard Wallace adjusted his cufflinks as the beggar's voice drifted through the night air. He stopped in his tracks, his entourage of wealthy friends turning with him. For a moment, there was silence. Then Richard let out a sharp laugh that cut through the crowd. "Good God," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "You sound like a dying cat begging for scraps." The companions burst into laughter. Elegant women in gowns covered their mouths. Bankers in tuxedos slapped each other's shoulders, reveling in the cruelty. The sound of mockery echoed louder than the beggar's trembling song. Pedestrians slowed to watch the spectacle. Some chuckled, others shook their heads. A circle began to form around the man in rags and the billionaire in silk. The power imbalance was glaring. One stood tall, shielded by wealth and arrogance. The other hunched, clutching his guitar like a shield against arrows of humiliation. Samuel, the beggar, lowered his eyes but did not falter. His fingers brushed against the strings, his lips parted. But before another note could escape, a gold coin clattered at his feet. Richard had tossed it with casual cruelty. "There," Richard sneered. "Payment for the noise. At least make it sound worth something." The crowd roared again. A young boy pointed at Samuel and laughed. Even strangers who didn't know the beggar joined the chorus of mockery. It was easier to side with power than with weakness. But Samuel didn't bend. Slowly, he picked up the coin, turning it between his rough fingers. His voice, soft but steady, rose above the ridicule. "Music is all I have left," he whispered. "Take it from me, and I have nothing." The laughter dimmed for a moment, confusion flickering in a few eyes. But Richard only smirked wider. He stepped forward, his polished shoes glinting under the streetlights, towering over Samuel like a king delivering judgment. "Then sing something real," Richard challenged, his tone sharp as a blade. "Make us feel something. Make us cry if you can." His words struck like a gauntlet thrown in a duel. The crowd leaned in, eager, hungry for entertainment. Some expected the beggar to crumble under pressure. Others hoped for more laughter, another cheap joke to fill their night. But Samuel simply closed his eyes. His grip on the guitar tightened, not in anger, but in resolve. Inside, he whispered a prayer, not for himself, but for the song he was about to share. Narrator. The beggar had nothing left to prove, yet everything to reveal. What none of them knew was that the next note he sang would pierce deeper than wealth, deeper than pride. And for one man, it would reopen a wound he had spent years trying to bury. Samuel lifted his chin, eyes closed, and let his fingers brush the strings of the guitar. A soft, trembling tune filled the night, gentle, almost fragile, like the whisper of wind through broken glass. The crowd snickered, unimpressed. A banker muttered, "Pathetic." A woman chuckled. "Is this supposed to be music?" Even Richard smirked, folded his arms with the confidence of a man watching an inevitable failure. But then the melody shifted. The simple notes merged into a haunting lullaby. The rhythm was tender, deliberate, carrying an ache that seemed too deep for the streets. Richard's smirk froze. His jaw tightened. His eyes widened as if the world around him had suddenly gone silent. That song, that exact lullaby, he had sung it years ago to a boy who would never grow old. His son, his only son. The sound struck him like a blade through the chest. His legs felt weak. His breath caught in his throat. He staggered back a step, memories crashing against like waves he could no longer hold back. A flash of the past overwhelmed him. His son, barely 8, sitting at the grand piano in their Manhattan penthouse, his small fingers fumbling with the keys. "Daddy, play it with me," the boy had begged. And Richard, who never wasted time on such things, had surprised himself by joining in. That lullaby became their secret, their bond, sung at bedtime, hummed during storms, whispered in the quiet moments when the world outside didn't matter. Then another memory, his son's last birthday, a cake glowing with 12 candles, his laughter filling the room as he clapped to the rhythm of that same lullaby, played clumsily yet beautifully on the piano. It was the last night Richard had heard it. The very next morning, screeching tires, shattering glass, flashing red lights, and silence that lasted forever. Richard's chest heaved. The laughter of his friends faded into a distant echo. His ears heard nothing now but the beggar's voice, raw, cracked, yet carrying the very essence of his son's memory. His arrogance cracked open, and for the first time in years, tears burned at the edges of his eyes. Around him, the crowd sensed something had changed. The smug smiles faltered. People shifted uncomfortably as Richard, the untouchable billionaire, suddenly looked fragile. His hand trembled as he reached for the wall to steady himself. A woman in the front whispered, "Why does he look like that? What's happening?" Samuel's song grew stronger, the lullaby spilling into the night with a power that demanded silence. No longer could anyone laugh. The melody carried grief, love, loss, all the emotions that wealth could never purchase. Every note was a wound laid bare, every lyric a memory resurrected. Richard pressed a hand to his chest, as if to stop his heart from breaking open. His mind screamed at him to leave, to escape, to silence the pain. But his body refused. He stood rooted to the ground, forced to face the ghost of his son through the trembling voice of a man he had just mocked. Narrator. No one in that crowd knew the history. No one expected that a ragged beggar's song would pierce the armor of the city's richest man. But in that moment, Samuel's melody carried a truth too powerful to ignore, a truth that could break the heart of a man who thought himself unbreakable. The last note of the lullaby lingered in the air like a ghost refusing to leave. The crowd, which moments earlier had mocked and laughed, now stood frozen. And at the center of it all, Richard Wallace, the billionaire known for his iron wool, collapsed onto his knees. His chest heaved, tears streamed down his face. His expensive suit wrinkled against the cold pavement. People gasped. Some whispered in disbelief. Is that Richard Wallace crying? Richard covered his face with trembling hands, unable to contain the sobs he had buried for years. The man who never showed weakness was now breaking apart in front of strangers. He looked up at Samuel, the beggar, his voice cracking like shattered glass. Where did you learn that song? He demanded, almost pleading. Tell me, please. Samuel lowered his guitar, his weathered eyes filled not with pride, but with quiet sorrow. He hesitated before answering, his voice soft, each word heavy with meaning. My son taught it to me, Samuel said. He and your boy were classmates, best friends. The crowd stirred, shocked. Richard's breath hitched as Samuel continued. They used to sit together after school. Your son loved music, but he was shy. My boy. He would hum the lullaby so your son could find the courage to play on the piano. They promised each other that even if the world forgot them, their song would live on. Richard felt the ground tilt beneath him. Memories of his son's laughter, the piano keys, the birthday candles, all collided with Samuel's revelation. The arrogant billionaire realized he had just mocked the only man who had kept his son's memory alive. Samuel's eyes glistened as he whispered, After the accident, my boy never stopped singing that tune. He said it was the only way to keep his friend with him. When I lost him too, I carried the song for both our sons. It's all I have left. Silence swallowed the street. No one dared move. No one dared laugh. The humiliation Richard had tried to inflict was now his own. The crowd, once entertained by cruelty, now watched a billionaire crumble before a beggar's truth. Richard's lips trembled. He reached out a hand toward Samuel, but could not find the strength to touch him. All these years, he whispered, I buried my grief in money, in pride, while you carried my son's soul in your voice. For the first time, Richard bowed his head, not to kings, not to markets, not to power, but to a man in rags. Narrator. In that moment, the roles reversed. The beggar who had nothing stood taller than the man who had everything. Because true wealth is not counted in dollars, but in the memories, in the love, in the humanity we choose to carry. The silence weighed heavy, until Richard forced himself to stand. His face was wet with tears, his voice trembling, but louder than ever before. Forgive me, he said, bowing his head toward Samuel. Forgive me for mocking you, for mocking the very memory of my son. The crowd gasped to see Richard Wallace, the untouchable billionaire, apologize publicly to a beggar was something no one thought possible. He turned, facing the curious onlookers, his pride shattered. This man, Richard continued, pointing at Samuel, is richer than any of us. He carried my son's spirit when I was too cowardly to face it. Tonight, I mocked him, but I was mocking myself. He stepped closer to Samuel, placing a trembling hand on his shoulder. Come with me. I will give you a home, a job, dignity. You deserve everything I can offer. But Samuel only shook his head, his voice calm and unwavering. I don't need your money, he whispered. I only wanted people to hear my song. Not for me, but for the boys who sang it first. Richard's lips trembled again, but this time he smiled through the tears. He understood. Weeks later, news spread across the city. Richard Wallace had established a music foundation in his son's name, dedicated to giving street performers and poor children a stage. And at the grand opening, the very first performer to step on stage was not a famous artist, not a celebrity, but Samuel, the beggar who sang with nothing but truth in his heart. Narrator. The billionaire thought he was giving Samuel dignity, but in truth, it was Samuel who restored his humanity. The theater lights dimmed as Samuel stepped onto the polished wooden stage. No longer hidden on a cold street corner, no longer mocked or ignored. Tonight, every seat was filled. The audience leaned forward in silence as his fingers touched the guitar once more. The same lullaby flowed, but now it carried no humiliation, no shame. It carried respect. In the front row sat Richard Wallace, humbled, his head bowed as if in prayer. Gone was the arrogant man who had laughed at another's pain. What remained was a father, finally at peace, watching the memory of his son live again through Samuel's voice. Tears glistened in the eyes of strangers as they listened. The song was no longer just about loss. It was about healing. A beggar's cracked voice had done what money, pride, and power never could. Narrator. The beggar was mocked, but his music healed even the coldest heart. Sometimes, the poorest voices carry the richest truths. The last note faded into sacred silence. Then, the crowd rose to its feet, applauding not just a performance, but a lesson, a reminder that dignity cannot be measured by wealth, and true riches live in compassion. As the screen fades, the narrator's voice returns, warm and steady. Have you ever judged someone before knowing their story? Tell us in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that prove true wealth is found in the heart. The applause echoes into darkness, leaving the viewer with a lump in their throat and a choice in their heart.